Welcome to Practice Growth, the podcast that combines business and wellness to help you do your very best as a therapist. Get ready to learn from seasoned clinicians about self-care, therapy, and running a business. Now, here's your host, Stephen Quinlan.
Hello. Welcome everybody to another episode of Practice Growth. Today we have Dr. Caroline Buzanko on the show. Dr. Buzanko is a jack of many trades, as you will see. She is not only a psychologist and a mom and a public speaker, but she's also an actress, and she details her journey through finishing school, going right into private practice, and then eventually opening up a group practice, in addition to doing all of these other things that she is currently doing. She also talks us through managing her own ADHD brain, and as you'll see at the end of the episode, she struggles as a result to put together some of the films that she's been in, as I asked her about, which we promptly remembered after we stopped recording. But don't worry, Caroline, I've got your IMDb here, and you have been in what look like some really cool films, such as Still Waters and In Control and Supposition, in addition to one that she does mention, which is coming out relatively soon on the Disney Channel. And when we were chatting after the show, Dr. Buzanko did remember that she actually almost landed a role in Interstellar as Casey Affleck's love interest, but due to her anxiety going into that situation, they did end up passing on her, which is actually a pretty interesting story of comparing yourself to other people that were there at the audition. I guess there was somebody who had played a love interest to Al Pacino who was there, and she ended up feeling like she didn't belong and ultimately potentially sabotage yourself, which I think is a great lesson for all of us who are feeling that imposter syndrome that we talked about, that you belong and that you can do it. This is really a fascinating episode in that we get to hear about the importance of knowing yourself and setting boundaries and being able to understand how many things to juggle at once. For Dr. Buzanko, that turns out to be actually quite a few, and there's not necessarily an issue with that, especially in that it keeps her work invigorated and re-energized, and as she says, she's doing something different every day, and obviously there is value in that. As you'll see, Dr. Buzanko approaches her life with a sense of humor about it all, and also has been able to accomplish so many amazing and disparate things in terms of her practice and group practice, and obviously all the things that she is doing outside of the office, which are just truly remarkable and extraordinary. So we are very lucky to have her today, and I think that there are a lot of great take-home messages for everybody. Don't forget to check out the website, growingthepractice.com, for all of our offerings up there to help you with your own wellness and business journey as a therapist. So right now, let's get ready to welcome and hear the story of the multi-talented Dr. Caroline Buzanko. Well, thanks so much for being here. I am excited to talk to you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. You do a lot of different things. I was noticing as I read over your website.
I do.
Obviously,
yeah, too much.
you're like, I am aware of this. But I mean, you're a psychologist, obviously, you're a mom. And then are you an actress? This was a surprise.
I am actually, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So I want to hear about all these things that you're doing and kind of how you got to this point. But I'm curious, kind of in the spirit of the show, if maybe you could start us off with just some advice that you might give to a therapist who is listening to this and is struggling in some way or another, feeling burnout or overwhelmed or whatever might be going on for them. What do you have any kind of words of advice for that person?
I think two things jump to mind, actually. One is boundaries,
Mm,
really establishing, and I think it's really easy to get into a scarcity sort of mentality when we're in private practice, that I need to take all the work because it's feast or famine, right? And so I just need to take it all, and I need to work long days. And I did that. I remember jamming 7 till 7, and then, oh, well, I'm there anyways. Yeah, I'll see you at 8 as well, and just squeaking in one more client. And so really creating those firm boundaries is going to be really important. If you have to have a wait list, and if people have to go see somebody else, that's okay. There's millions of people out there. There's always going to be work. But on that note as well, getting help, like an assistant. I think that's probably my biggest regret, that I didn't get right away, because it's easy to fall into bad habits. Even now, I still am trying to work on that boundary piece, and clients are going around. I finally have someone who's doing all my client appointments, and I say, this is my schedule. You only book, in this time. And then it's a lot easier. But clients are, hey, Martin says that they can't see you for a few weeks. Can you see us maybe this weekend? Or, so it's really about, I think they go hand in hand. Getting that help right away is going to be important, and then creating those boundaries.
So you mean actually having like a physical person that's there, like a receptionist, essentially, either answering the phone for you, making those appointments, that kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
Could be virtually as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of people do that now as well.
Yeah. But actually managing your schedule, managing some of those administrative tasks. I wish I had hired someone years and years ago. Yeah.
I love what you said about the boundaries and the scarcity. And it's so easy to get pulled into that mindset. As you said, I still, even at this point, I will every once in a while hear that little kind of like, well, maybe you should, make sure that you kind of gather all these resources and like hoard them off yourself somewhere, which is like, it's so ridiculous, but it kind of pops up on you every once in a while.
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. And the boundaries piece, I mean, I can relate to that as well. I remember very clearly when I stopped seeing people at 6 o'clock. I just finally made 5 o'clock my last appointment, so I could actually get home and see the family before it was like I would get home and hope that somebody was still awake so I could say goodnight to them. And it's just like, it's hard.
It is. Yeah. And if you're just exhausted, even if you do get home, but you've had such a long day, you're exhausted you don't even want to play with your kids or hang out. You're just so tired. Right. And that's not good either.
Yeah, exactly. Any advice from kind of the business side of things? Is there anything that you've noticed either recently or kind of over the years that has made running your practice better for you or easier for you in some way?
Well, getting help, like I said, automizing as much as you can is, I mean, up until probably a year ago, I still have my day timer right next to me here, paper and pencil, but being able to automate things makes all the difference in the world. So whether, even payments, people will be like, how do I pay you? I'm like, I don't know. The system will just send you an invoice later on today, so that I don't have to worry about that. And then having checks and balances after, making sure people are paying. But I think that makes all the difference in the world as well. Just being able to have all of those pieces in where, someone books an appointment, the system's automatically sending all that paperwork. So having a really good EHR system or whatever it is that you're going to be using, that just kind of helps along with those processes.
Yeah, absolutely. There's work sometimes on the front end of that with the learning curve that is usually required with these systems, but it's absolutely worth it.
Certainly. And I have learned that, it's spending money out of your own pocket, but hiring people to help you do things. So whether it's your Google or your SEO on your website, and, I'm really finding I have to delegate all of those things, and it does make a big, big difference.
Yeah, of course. I mean, unless you went to school for digital marketing and you're a therapist, chances are you don't really know how to do that stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it's so crucial to be able to let go of that scarcity mindset, as you were describing earlier, and know that you are going to have some overhead with things and you are going to pay for some stuff, and that it's okay and well worth whatever sort of expenditure that is for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So talk to me about how you got started in the work. What kind of drew you to being a psychologist, and I guess eventually all of these other things as well?
Well, yeah, it's a bit of a choose your own adventure type of story is what I always joke about. I think it's my ADHD brain, but I always wanted to be a cop. That's always, when I was younger, teacher. And then once I was high school, university, I wanted to be a cop, but didn't like the idea of shift work. But then I saw the movie Copycat. I don't know if it's an old one with
Nicolas Cage or something. No,
Sigourney Weaver. And Junior. I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember.
It's like it's like a serial killer kind of thing.
Yeah, right? And she does criminal profiling. I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I actually started university in anthropology, but I saw that movie and finished with psychology. And I started working with kiddos with autism. It was just I saw an ad my last year of university and just kind of fell into that. Really didn't think I was going to become a psychologist. I did really well in my undergrad. And so all of my instructors were like, I'll supervise you, come to your master's. I'm like, who would ever want to do grad school? That's dumb. No, there's no way that I'm going to do that. Along the way, I joined the Army in there and then I fell into acting as well. And so then it was probably once I graduated from psychology, I was working with kiddos with autism, but my goal was to go to LA and I was going to be an actress. And one day my mom was like, you know what? You're never going to be more famous than the Katie lady. So this was early 90s.
The Katie lady?
Yeah. So Kraft Dinner, there was these big commercials for Kraft Dinner. She had big, crazy red hair. So it was, that's what that was. And so she's like, what are you going to do with your life? And so that was when I started thinking, well, what am I going to do? I continued doing acting, but my friend had found this program. It was an online master's program. Hey, we should do this together. And then we can go have our own coffee shop and we can do some counseling. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I applied. We had 2 weeks for the application. I applied, got accepted. She did not apply. So I continued on, finished my master's, became a psychologist. And then a few years later, decided to go back and get my PhD. So yeah, it was kind of a whirlwind. It wasn't a straight, this is what I know I'm going to do. I just kind of fell into it. Just one sort of serendipitous, I guess. From one thing to another.
I feel like that happens a lot. And is also, I have some similar aspects in my own development, is that I fell into this job that was working with people who were disabled. And then I happened to read some books, and then I saw a movie. It was funny. I was talking to my mom, I think it was yesterday, and she was like, do you remember when you saw Good Will Hunting? And I was like, well, maybe not for the first time. She's like, you watched the movie and then you were like, that's what I want to do.
Wow.
So it's so interesting that these things just kind of come along, and then you go down that path, and that's wherever you sort of end up. So I'm curious about, you became a psychologist, and then you've had this kind of acting thing going along in the background for some time. Is that something, are you still doing some of that, or is that all in the past?
I am. I was just on a Disney set actually a month ago. So yeah, really? I'm still doing, and I'm up for a potential role right now. It always comes down to me and one other woman. Yeah. And people are like, how are you doing that? People in the acting world, you're not a serious actor because you don't live every minute of your day acting. And then the psychologists are like, how are you doing that? But it's all about human behavior. It's all about listening. I learned so much doing both of them. So they do really go hand in hand. It's been beneficial, from a psychological point of view, doing my acting, because you just listen, and it's moment by moment and feeling the feelings, right? And being there with whoever you're with, which is amazing for clients. And then conversely, doing it with the acting as well. So yeah,
Mm.
It's kind of my being able to create is the basis of all happiness. It doesn't matter what you do. And this is sort of one of my creative outlets that's on the self-care side of things as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting and important. I completely agree with that, that having something, some baby or something that you're creating all the time, it really helps to give you a sense of ownership over something. Like, this is mine, this is my thing, this is what I'm doing. And it's something that is outside of the therapy room that I think a lot of clinicians sometimes get pigeonholed in that place. Like, this is what I do. I am a therapist. I sit here and I therapize, and that's it. End of story. And that's always struck me as being kind of limiting. I must say, I've never put acting and psychology together in my head, but it makes sense now that you say it.
I actually bring in when I teach, working alliance courses and things like that, counseling skill courses with my graduate students. I do a lot of improv activities
Mm,
and a lot of just the listening piece or just having to sit in silence, staring
mm.
at each other for a few minutes, right? And being able to sit with that silence and awkwardness and all of those things. I think that there's so much value that we can learn.
Do you find that you do like role playing or something like that in your therapy? Is that something that kind of comes out in the therapy room with you as well? Or are those things sort of separate?
No, I don't really do any role playing per
Mm,
se.
mhm.
I mean, certainly we do, empty chair technique and things like that.
Right.
But no specific role playing. The yes, let's like improv kinds of things. I work especially with a lot of anxious kids. That's
Mhm.
when I do counseling. That's a huge piece of it. And so I will bring in improv types of ideas
Okay.
where it's yes, let's, because anxiety wants us, no, 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 wants us to stay in bed under the covers, right? That's how our brain is built. And so being able to have new experiences, right? This is how
Mm.
we're going to learn how to manage anxiety, not knowing from one second to the next what's going to happen. So I definitely bring in some of those principles.
Tell me more about yes, let's. What is that exactly?
So in improv, essentially, you can't say no to somebody's idea.
Uh-huh.
So you're in a skit and it's unscripted, right? It's
Mhm.
just whatever comes up in the moment. And there was actually a show, I can't remember the name of it. It was a Canadian sort of improv show. But
Uh,
anyways, so the audience might throw out an idea like, you've turned into a donkey. So you
uh-huh.
just got to go with that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah. Now I'm a donkey. Right. And whatever, whatever they throw out, you've got to do that. Or, hey, let's go base jumping. Okay, yes, let's go do that. And now we're pretending to base jump or whatever it
Uh-huh.
is.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
it's just
Mm.
kind of going with whatever's coming up.
It makes me think of like, whose line is it anyway? Do you guys
Oh,
have that show up
yeah,
in
that's
Canada? Is that
it.
what it
That's
is?
the one I
Okay.
was thinking of. That's what I
Yeah.
was thinking of. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fascinating. It's that same spirit of, I mean, it makes me think of um, exposure techniques and working with anxiety and having to go head on into these things that feel very overwhelming, and just kind of latching on to some of that spirit of, hey, we're just going to do this no matter what. And that sense of that, like, you, in some ways, I mean, of course you have a choice, but it feels like you don't have a choice. It's almost like a positive peer pressure kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. That's so interesting. So you mentioned that your brain kind of goes all over the place, and I know you've been very open about your struggles with ADHD, and tell me about how that has kind of informed your work.
Well, it's definitely helped me come from a very strengths based sort of focus and looking at the assets. For a long time, I was doing a lot of workshops and presenting just on the strengths of ADHD,
Mm,
because a lot of people are successful because of their ADHD, not in spite of it. And I think that that's a big piece. I mean, my husband always teases me that I'm all over the place and I don't plan and I'm so spontaneous, but I think that that's what's been the key to my success. And so being able to highlight a lot of those pieces, and I work with a lot of even teenagers who are just like, I wish I had a normal brain, and they're not able to see the benefits. And oftentimes a lot of time, um the things that frustrate parents and teachers the most are usually kiddos' strengths, for example. And so I think that that's really helped inform all the work that I do, is looking at these pieces that we might get down on ourselves about, but flipping it. What's the flip side of that? Looking at the resilience. And so that really informs a lot of what I do. And a big chunk of my work is actually assessments. I do a lot of psychological assessments. And so I see that informing all the time. What are the strengths here? The things that people are coming with their concerns, whether they're learning concerns or attention concerns or whatnot. How do we flip that, and how can we capitalize on the strengths that kiddos do have? So I think that that's been a huge piece. And even for my girls who obviously also have ADHD, we've been able to embrace that. And so whether it's ADHD or whatever's going on for us, we all have our thing, right? We all have something.
Sure.
Being able to embrace that and work with it, not fight against it.
I love how non-pathologizing that is, like working from that strengths-based perspective. It's something for me with a social work background that really resonates for me. And it makes me think of, because I've also worked with a lot of kids who have autism or high functioning Asperger's, whatever. And that showing them that just because your brain works in a different way, it's not necessarily a less than way. It's just different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so capitalizing, on the logicalness of your thinking. I mean, you don't let emotions get in the way, but you're kind of like Spock. There are emotions there, but you can think about things really rationally and objectively. So, yeah.
Yeah. So do you feel like, I'm curious about all these different things, as we talked about at the start of the show, that you have going on, like you have all these different pots on kind of these different burners. And did you have a sense going into things like, this is how I want to structure things to be, and I know that this is what's going to work well for me? Or do you feel like you just kind of organically went into that?
No idea.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that's been my strength, right? It's not having a very rigid, it's got to be like this. It's like, but it can be my downfall though. And this is why boundaries have become so important, because I am a yes man, not because I want to please. It's just like, that sounds awesome, I got to do that. Yes, that sounds awesome, I got to do that. And so now it's like, my husband's always saying, you got to drop something, Caroline, you got to drop something. But I'm like, I love it all so much. So, that can be really tricky, but it really has just grown organically. Yeah. Now I want to look at this, and I want to look at this. And that's why I love psychology, is because we could be doing a million different things. I'm not stuck in one office doing the exact same thing every single day. Every day I am doing something different. I'm in a different place. I'm seeing different people. So
you're on the set of a Disney show.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I love that message, because as I was saying earlier, I think it's so easily to get in that box of that there's nothing else to do. I'm always going to be doing this. And then I think a lot of times people will leave the profession even because they feel like, I can't do this anymore, and this feels too overwhelming. But the beauty of this work is that first of all, it lends itself so well to many different avenues. And also there are so many opportunities to do different things, broaden out, so that you have a little bit more balance in your life. And I think that's something you were alluding to as well, is that the importance of knowing yourself and knowing for you what looks like a balanced existence. So for you, if it's juggling 5 different things at once, then that's great. But also knowing yourself, well, if I have 6 different things at once, maybe that's one too many.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there is a bit of a trial and error, but you would never know though, if you never take risks either. Right. And so, I mean, obviously there's going to be things you're like, no, I have no interest in doing that at all. And that's totally fine. But if it's like, oh, that does sound interesting. I think we create these almost safety lines, these safety nets. And we don't ever want to cut that tether line and just take risks. I'm always talking about, we got to force the universe. And yeah, sometimes I think even just going into private practice is really risky for a lot of people. They're
totally.
like, oh, because I don't have benefits and RSP and or whatever it is for you guys, and there's all of these different, like a consistent salary, like that's a big unknown.
For sure. What is RSP? Is that wonderful Canadian healthcare or something, or what are we talking about?
RSPs are retirement registered savings
I see. Okay.
So for retirement. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that's definitely part of the picture as well. And I remember pretty clearly making that leap into practice and just being terrified because, as you say, you do have to kill to eat, essentially, and you just don't really know for sure that your phone is going to keep ringing, and that feels really scary. Do you remember feeling like that when you were kind of first starting out?
Oh yeah. And there's still times where I'm like, I don't have any assessments booked next month, and there is those times. And I know summer times are a little bit quieter, for example. So, but it's funny because my husband's like, oh, you just did it, Caroline. I'm like, what? He's like, every time you say, oh, I'm kind of worried about what next month is going to look like, a floodgate of calls come in.
True. Yep. That is so true. I've learned to, first of all, recognize that pattern that you're talking about. Like if you go through it enough times, you see it. You're like, oh, okay. I was just saying the other day, oh gosh, really? I don't have that many people. And then all of a sudden the floodgates open. But also to enjoy those times where maybe it is a little bit slower for you. And what can you do at that point to kind of reinvigorate yourself? Because I mean, obviously that's a critical piece, even if you are doing all of these other things that keep therapy itself fresh for you. It's still so important to make sure that you're doing things for you that kind of fill you back up again.
Yeah, which is so important. And there's still, because I have a group practice and I do a lot of supervision with students. And so there is still, am I going to have enough work for everybody to get the hours that they need to register as a psychologist or to graduate, to finish their internship. So there are certainly those pieces that, worries, but it's always worked out. So
yeah, I feel like they're inevitable, the worries. Like they just, they pop up kind of no matter how long you've been doing this or at what point in your career you are. It's just kind of something that is part and parcel of the whole deal. Absolutely. So tell me about your group practice and what how did you get to that decision of okay, now I'm going to open up my doors in that way?
Well, I've always loved teaching and supervising. So I teach as well. And yeah, I think I don't remember how I first started taking students as a practicum, but that's how I started, was just taking students. Actually, it was a coworker when I was working with kiddos with autism. So it was just someone else there who decided to go back to get her master's. And so she needed practicum. And then once she was graduated, she wanted to do her provisional hours with me. So that's kind of how I started doing that. I'm like, oh, I really enjoy this. And as I was growing, I just realized I need more help. I need more people here anyways. So I have kind of two branches. I've got people who are doing counseling, and then I've got people who are doing assessments as well. And so once, the practice grows enough, I realized, okay, I need to bring somebody else in. But it did start all with supervisees, and then they just don't leave. They're like, can I just stay on with you? And I'm like, yeah, of course, stay on. And so that's how I've kind of grown, because almost everyone, I would say, in the practice now has been a student of mine or a supervisee at some point.
I would imagine one of the things that's nice about that is that, having a hand in sort of rearing them, if you will, or bringing them along, that that a lot of those foundations are there via your supervising and training, so that it's different than just plucking somebody off the street. Because I know as a lot of group practices will struggle with that. How do I find somebody who, because you're essentially attaching them to your name, right? As your business, and that can feel really scary.
Yeah. And I'm supervising. So I do a lot of professional, even people who are already psychologists who are just doing more training or need to upgrade, or want to branch out in a different area of practice. And so I'm supervising their work. And it's just like, oh man, this is really not good work. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like reteaching them. So it is scary because it is your name. It's your company, right? When you are bringing people under. So, yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way. I kind of get to
Have
groom these people into the
I see.
practice.
Okay. I was like, I hope I haven't scared you all of a sudden when he's
No,
thought of it that way.
no,
Okay.
not at all.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I mean, I think about, and I hesitate to use these metaphors because obviously people are people and they're students and at a certain point in their life, but it makes me think about, I've had therapy dogs in my practice for a long time, and I always get them as puppies because I know for sure that there's not going to be any, crazy stuff happening when they're in those sort of formative years. So yeah, that's great. Um, do you remember ever feeling like you wanted to do something else, or have you felt any kind of seeds of dissatisfaction or anything like that at any point in your career?
I know working for somebody else has just never been a good thing for me. And so when I worked for an agency, even doing my internship, it was a slog. Just needing to go to this meeting that's a waste of time. And maybe that's my ADHD brain, but I've always had a really hard time working for someone else. And so I just knew I went right into private practice as soon as I graduated because I just knew I wouldn't be able to work for anybody else. So that's probably where I was most dissatisfied. But there's times where I'm like, oh man, I just want a 9-to-5 job where I am for an agency. They can deal with all of this other stuff I don't need to worry about. And, so sometimes I do crave that because I work so much more being in private practice than I would if I did have a 9-to-5 job with an agency. But I would say that where I feel stuck when my schedule's not my own, and I don't necessarily get to work with who I want to work with. I think that's kind of the hardest part that I've experienced in my professional career anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. As you're saying that about the meetings, I can see myself sitting in those meetings and just thinking, this is the biggest waste of time ever. I'm going to be here for an hour or 2 hours, and there's so many other things that I could be doing. And it's like you're locked into this place and you have no choice. You have to sit there, and it just never feels good.
Yeah. And filling out paperwork that nobody's ever going to read, or there's just so much red tape that it's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tell me about that you went right from school into private practice and what that was like for you, because I've heard students who I know who sometimes will get conflicting advice on this, because on the one hand, there's like, hey, why bother going through trudging along all of that stuff that we were just describing when you can kind of cut to the chase and just sort of get started and go for it, save yourself the sort of agony of being in that place. And there are other people who would say, well, you really need to be seasoned kind of a certain amount before you go off into private practice. What do you think about that?
Well, research actually shows that we plateau in our skills after 50 hours of practice. So you're probably best, that's a week, like a week and a half of working full time, right? So you're probably, I think the big thing that gets in people's way is the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Like I need to have more experience. I think that's, again, another limiting belief that we might have. And again, I don't think you'll ever feel ready until you just make the jump, So for example, I'll have intern students who are starting assessment. So I've got counseling students who have to do an assessment internship. And they just want to watch me and watch me and watch me. And now it's 3 months in and they've only ever watched me because they're not feeling comfortable. I'm like, you're never going to learn these instruments until you start doing them. And yeah, you're going to mess up, but that's how we build our skills. And that's how we develop our resilience, right? And don't get caught in the idea that I have to have a job that pays me benefits or whatnot, the consistent salary. It's being able to look at, for some people, that agency piece is going to be what they want. And that's what they need that fits. They don't have to worry about all of the other pieces, right? They can just go in, do their job, leave it at 5 o'clock and go home and not think about it until the next day. Whereas some people are going to be dissatisfied. So it's really understanding what's important for you, right? So looking at what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? Do you want to have flexibility? Like, I love the idea that I could just go skiing tomorrow if I would just want to go skiing, right? And so looking at that flexibility and how important is that stability for you. But there is no right or wrong. If you want to start tomorrow a private practice, go and start a private practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it plays right into that yes, let's mindset that we were talking about earlier. If you really think that this is where you're going to excel and you know that you have this passion for working with whatever specific population that is for you, I just say go for it, because that comes across and you're going to do great work and people are going to respond to that and you're going to fill up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if someone has given you a piece of paper and you've done all your licensing and you've had a supervisor, obviously people are confident that you can work with a client.
Yeah.
All by yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we have to do our hours to be licensed. So
yeah. It was just owning that piece yourself that, as you're saying, I feel like can be difficult. And as we were talking about earlier, is kind of an ongoing process. You have to almost remind yourself, hey, I can do this. Like, I know I have this skill, because that imposter syndrome is something that, again, it's this little sort of head that pops up out of nowhere and is like, well, I don't know about you. Maybe you really shouldn't be. You think that really, and all this doubt kind of creeps in, and recognizing it for what it is and being able to kind of put it back in its place, I feel like is really paramount.
Yeah. Doing the opposite of what it tells you.
Right. Leaning into that difficulty, which is, again, so much of what we would tell our clients or kids, as you were saying, that have anxiety, like you've got to lean into it. And as you said, the universe kind of responds to that. That's where the work is, whatever feels difficult for you in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I love it. So are you working on anything in particular these days? Did we not cover anything that you're doing, or?
Well, there's so much that I'm doing that we
thought you might say that.
Yeah. There's lots of things. One of the things, I have developed this anxiety compass. And so I am doing a lot more online sort of work, extending past the office, being able to reach more people. And so I do professional training, but I also help support parents as well through my online training. But that's kind of where I've shifted my focus, is more professional development training. So I'm doing a lot of public speaking and professional development workshops for different agencies and schools and things like that. And then I've got my PD sort of training and with weekly consultation calls. So I'm really focusing more on that piece, because I've always loved teaching and training. And I see so many mistakes that are being made by therapists when it comes to anxiety, that are actually, they're making anxiety worse or keeping clients stuck in their anxiety. So I've just wanted to shift, because I definitely see, how can I support more? I can support other professionals. They're going to support more clients. And so, it's a much broader reach. And that's kind of my ADHD brain, where I'm just like, I just want to go big, for acting. I want to win an Oscar. And in the psychology world, this is it. I just want to be able to help support as many people as I can. And if I got stuck in my office, I can only help support, maybe a few hundred in my lifetime, but now I can do that on a broader scale.
Yeah, that's a lot of my thought process as well, is kind of, how can I help more therapists help themselves, and then in turn help more people, try to affect change on this larger scale, I feel like is such a wonderful thing that we're afforded in this day and age, that you can do that on this broad, as literally a global scale, which is so amazing.
Mhm.
Talk to me briefly about the pandemic and how that kind of shifted focus in your practice. Was this kind of part of that, or had you been, as you said, you love to teach and you've been thinking about this?
Yeah, I've been developing the compass for over the past 10 years. So
Okay.
this is something that I've been thinking about and doing, and started even before the pandemic.
Oh,
So
okay. Mhm.
with the pandemic, the two big things that I did start were two podcasts.
Mm.
So podcasting is brand new for me. Since the pandemic, I would say that's probably been the biggest change. And, within my counseling,
Mhm.
a lot more teletherapy.
Mhm.
With assessments, I still had to see people in person, but
Mhm. Right. Okay.
otherwise, yeah, it's probably more the podcasts that have made a biggest
How
difference.
how is how is the podcasting going? And tell us the name of your shows.
One is I've kind of changed the name, but it's Overpowering Emotions, and it's really
Okay.
geared for mental health therapists around
Mhm.
anxiety, just really deep diving into what's happening in the brain. And I actually
Nice.
have like 4 episodes just about the brain and the different pathways that anxiety takes.
Uh-huh.
And I just started another one. Actually, I'm loving it. It's with my husband, Parents of the Year.
Ah.
And we just kind of chat about different, we each bring a question
Uh-huh.
to chat about, and it's very conversational like this. It's not so academic-y, jargony as my
Right.
other one,
Uh-huh.
where we just, we've talked about, this week's episode was about punishing,
Mm.
using punishment with your
Mm.
children. What are
Mm.
your thoughts on that? So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of fun.
Well, if it's anything like the pictures of you and your husband and your family on your website, I'm sure it's a bunch of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it really comes across kind of, your just, I don't know, enjoyment of what it is that you're doing, and not getting so caught up in it. Things have to look a certain way, or you have to do things this way. And I just thought that was pretty cool and refreshing.
Oh, that's good. Good feedback. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm a blubbering mess on some episodes. And like, he's always teasing me, well, just about the planning, right? Like, he's like,
Yeah.
you just don't know how to plan. And he's like, where's your passport? I'm like, well, I don't know. I've got a passport. Like, what? And I think that that's good. I mean, it helps
Yeah.
normalize and humanize everyone, especially when we get back to that imposter syndrome, and feel like perfectionism is such a hot topic these days. And
Yeah.
so I think, it is good to just, we're all human too,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of work too, just on, if you look on social media around mental health therapists needing their own support and their
Yeah.
own, and I think that people might forget that even as doctors and professionals, we are
Mhm.
human. We make mistakes. We are anxious. We beat ourselves up, and so I
Mhm.
hope, I do inspire a little bit of that sort of humanization piece.
Absolutely. Me too. And I think that it can really get in the way of your own management of this stuff if you feel like you have to hold yourself to this unrealistic standard of, well, I'm a doctor and I'm a therapist and I must therefore, just dispense therapy like this, and that's what I do. And it keeps you in that place that is ultimately leading you towards more just feeling bad, feeling burnt out, especially if you make a mistake or something, which of course everybody does. Then you kind of trash yourself for it, and it's just stuck in this place of negativity. So
Mhm.
I completely agree. I think that's really important to remember. There's a shift in mental health now, I feel like, kind of leaning towards that, of like, eh, no longer are the therapists the one who are sitting behind some Freudian couch with their notepad and, or this blank slate and barely even people, but that it's, it's the relationship itself, that's curative. And there are people too that I've seen, I think some relatively good portrayals of that in the media, although don't get me started on that in general, unless it's Goodwill Hunting, I suppose. I have sort of thing that I don't like about it. But yeah, it's nice to see. It's nice to see that shift and just allowing other therapists to be able to just be people as well.
Mm-hmm. It's so important. I was just doing a workshop actually for a school division, and I started crying. I'm like, oh man, this is the second time I've cried. And everyone in the chat's like, no, it's your third time, Caroline, third time crying. But it really is about, I mean, it's the whole dodo bird philosophy when it comes to therapy, right? It's about the common factors. And one of the biggest common factors is that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Any kind of other parting words that you feel like you might want to give to other therapists who are trying to find their footing in this was certainly a difficult time in many ways?
I think it's just a matter of not necessarily, you don't have to have a 10-year plan, but I love the railway analogy. So what tracks are you on right now? And where are those tracks taking you? And where are they going to end you at the end of this year? Do you want to stay on these tracks, or do we have to stop at the station and shift our tracks? And I love that analogy, just looking even just for right now. Probably because my ADHD brain, I can't see into the future that far, but just knowing, are these the right tracks, or do I need to shift a little bit?
Oh, that's great. I love it. And I can't let you go without asking you, have we seen you in anything acting wise that we might recognize?
Probably not. I'm just trying to think. I was just on Under the Banner of Heaven.
Okay.
So that's coming out with Andrew Garfield.
Is that the Disney one?
That's the Disney one. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
I can't think off the top of my head anything. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. There is something.
Well, Under the Banner of Heaven.
But anyway,
we'll look for that coming out. And that's coming out. And that sounds great. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again so much. Definitely appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that was Dr. Caroline Buzanko. Her website is Dr. Caroline Buzanko, Buzanko.com. You can check out all of the things that she's doing there, from online courses to her clinic services, public speaking, and also the Anxiety Compass Mastery Training, which we mentioned. She also does have an IMDb page if you are interested in checking out all of the movies and shows that she's been in, and there are quite a few. Wow, you've been busy. So that is it for today, and until next time, be well and be in touch.
This podcast is not intended as medical or psychological treatment. In no way should it replace treatment from a mental health professional.